One of the scariest interactions in our recovery relationships is the sharing of the fifth step. But what are some of those things that we need to be aware of and think about in the receiving of the fifth step and in the sharing of the fifth step? Today, we're going to talk about it. Well, welcome to Celebrate Recovery Official Podcast. This is a podcast where we share life change stories through courage, hope, and leadership wisdom, all centered around the Celebrate Recovery principles based on the Beatitudes, where Jesus helps us. He equips us to face our hurts, hang-ups, and habits, and even our broken relationships so that we can walk in freedom, fullness of life as He died for us to live. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I struggle with drugs and alcohol and perfectionism. My name is Rodney. I'm the Global Field Director with Celebrate Recovery. Hey, welcome to our podcast. So grateful for all of our listeners. Thank you for the ratings you're giving us. It helps us to reach more people, and excited for our guests today. You've heard and seen them in conferences and different trainings we've had across the globe. So I've got two special, strong women. I'm a little bit intimidated by the strength of these two women on this podcast, but I know you're going to get a lot out of this. Jeni Baker, who is the co-global executive director of Celebrate Recovery, and Mary Owen, the national training director of Celebrate Recovery. Welcome, ladies.
Hey, I'm glad
Hello. Me too. Hello.
Yeah. Well, Jeni, why don't you introduce yourself, and then Mary, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Great. Hi, my name is Jeni, and I'm a grateful believer, and I struggle with codependency, and I'm an adult child of family dysfunction.
Hey, Jeni.
Hey.
Hello. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ who struggles with codependency. My name is Mary.
Hey, Mary.
Hey, Mary.
So glad y'all are here, and you guys really bring a lot to this ministry, and I know a lot of people just love you to death and appreciate your wisdom and the nuggets that you share. And we've been talking about this topic of the fifth step, and it's interesting to think about. The fifth step is basically, if you're new to recovery, it's basically where we're taking the moral inventory that we've worked so hard to write out, and now we're going to share it with a trusted, and that's a key thing, trusted person, a sponsor, which is a fancy word for a mentor in recovery circles, so that we can just be rid ourselves of that and learn and grow through that to learn from those past mistakes. But I'd love to start with this, and I don't care who goes first. Maybe we can flip a coin, but thinking about some of those horror stories, right? It's like we tend to make the fifth step, and especially our black and white people, man, you tell me I'm supposed to do this, and how do I take it to the next level? And we've seen that even, it makes me think of guidelines, right? No crosstalk. Well, that means maybe we need to make no tissue. You can't hand somebody a tissue. That's for another podcast, but it does speak to how we can take something that is a beautiful privilege and responsibility, and we can a little bit overcomplicate it. So I'd love to kind of hear, what are some of those nightmare stories, maybe that have happened to you, or maybe you've heard of other people share with you through the years. How many years, Jeni, you've been doing this? Is it 9?
9.
Yeah.
9 years.
Yeah. And Mary, you've been how many years?
Oh, my goodness. Well, we've been in recovery, Mike and I, for 35 years.
Goodness gracious.
And Celebrate Recovery, I'm not even sure of those, at least half of that.
Yeah. So we're over 40 years of experience just between you two ladies. And so I would imagine you've heard some stories of things that went wrong, and you kind of go, why? Why did that happen? But what are some of those things that you've heard where we've kind of overcomplicated things?
Well, I can tell an experience that I had along the way. And I can tell you that when I did one of my fifth steps, let's put it this way. When I did one of my fifth steps, I was still nervous. I was so scared because the fourth and the fifth step in my mind, I keep them attached. I mean, I know they're two separate steps, but you have to do your fourth. You can't do the fifth unless you've done the fourth. It's, it's impossible. So I was scared to do my fourth step because I was so afraid I would do it wrong, especially being Johnny's wife and being the co-founder's daughter-in-law. I was like, I'm going to really embarrass myself if I don't do this, and I'll embarrass them. So I had this fear that I was going to do it wrong, which is that perfectionism that I struggle with, and that I was going to embarrass them in the process. And so the fifth step, not only was I afraid of that, but I was also afraid of sharing shame, sharing past hurt, reliving past hurt, having to face it all again. I mean, I faced it writing it down in my fourth step, but then again, facing it again when you tell somebody else in your fifth step. So those were some of my fears going into it. And the person who listened to my fifth step, at the end, what I needed was, thank you for sharing that with me. Great job. And a hug, maybe, if you're comfortable giving that. And that would have done a lot for me, a hug. And just, I'm really proud of you. That was really hard. And thank you for, what a privilege to let me hear this. Instead, what I got was, okay, that was good, but here's, maybe you didn't hit this. And here's maybe you didn't hit this. And here's maybe you didn't hit this. And what it did is it played right into that fear of you did it wrong. Which was my fear. So it validated that fear that I had of, you're going to do this wrong. And I went and I deflated. So after this big, hard process, instead of walking away feeling proud, I deflated. And it was like, oh man, just what I didn't do it right. And there were some other things that it gets a little bit worse. I won't go into the details, but all that to say that I walked away and went, okay, I never want to do that to somebody. I never want somebody to feel that way after I sit with them and hear their fifth step.
Yeah. It's important. I think it's good. Kind of my just staying curious about, I wonder what that sponsor, what was going through their head and heart. And that might be good even for our listeners. Maybe they're about to listen to their first fifth step, and what are some of the lies that they're believing? And it makes me curious, what were they thinking in their heart that would maybe create a response that would say, there's got to be more. You got to do this. And, it makes me curious. I wonder, just as we're kind of spitballing a little bit here, what do you think? It makes me kind of think that perfectionistic and the pressure we put on ourselves.
Yes.
What do you think the sponsor, what's going through their heart that they would, it feels like you kind of got dropped. Is that a good word? You just kind of got dropped in that space?
It felt, I think I like the way you put it. I liked how you said that I felt the need to be perfect in giving it. And the person listening could have felt this perfection, this need to be perfect in listening to it, and what their perceived responsibility is in listening to the fifth step. So you're right. I've never thought about it that way. But you're right. That thinking back on it, it's like, oh, I wonder what she felt her responsibility was exactly in that role. And I think something we can hit on, we don't have to hit on this very second, but I do want to hit on it, is that not everybody is going to have a sponsor to listen to their fifth step. Yes, ideally we like you to have a sponsor by this point, but sometimes people have a hard time finding sponsors. And so sometimes, I like what you said. The key is finding somebody that you trust. Yeah. That's in that mentor role in your life that can listen, and then sitting down and talking about what the responsibilities are. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Because I think, and Mary, want to hear from you. I think it makes me wonder, we tend to do that with anything, right? You're going to be a leader now. It's like, we look at the job description and it's like, but there's gotta be more. That can't be enough. Even thinking about the way we facilitate, we talk about you're a leader, but you're really a facilitator. You're facilitating the group as you participate in the group, right? But there can be pressures like, well, that can't be enough. I mean, they're coming to me with this stuff and they trusted me, they respect me. So maybe I've got to be able to deliver something that
will make them walk away feeling impacted, right? Because I had all this vast wisdom and they just poured their heart out, and now I've got to have a comeback. And if I don't have a comeback, what does that say about me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, Mary, for you, as we were talking earlier, you haven't had any bad experiences personally, but what are your expectations for, maybe we start with the one who is a sponsor. What
Sponsor? Oh,
yeah, what would be the expectations if I'm a sponsor and I'm about to go in to hear a fifth step? What are some practical things that you're sharing with them to set that up so that we don't put someone in a bad experience situation? What would be some of those things?
okay. Well, first of all, thank you. And I, like Jenny was saying, I don't think there is not one single person on this earth that's not nervous when they're fixing to share their fifth step.
Yeah.
It's just, well, just writing your fourth step, that's just a hard thing. And so you're just, I want to be perfect writing it. But then I realized later that really I couldn't even come up with all of that first time. I mean, God did not even bring it to my mind. It took several step studies before, now 35 years later, I still have things to work on. So you're not going to all get it in the first time anyway. But on a sponsor's end, I talk about them as speaker and listener instead of sponsor and sponsee, because sometimes it's not your sponsor that listens to your fifth step. So I'll call them the speaker and the listener. But when I think about being the speaker or the sponsee, it is such an honor when somebody asks me to listen to their fifth step. So I like to prepare myself for that time, because that is going to be a holy time in that listener's life, or if it's my sponsee, because they're going to share all their deepest hurts with me. And so to prepare for that occasion, the most important thing, which I know you already know what it is to start praying for the person who's going to share their moral inventory with you. And, the speaker or the sponsee has most likely spent months, weeks of hard work thinking back over all the years, and they've shed so many tears remembering back while writing their inventory, and they're probably anxious about having to share it all out loud. And now they've chosen you for a reason to listen to it.
Wow.
So this is a huge honor that we're getting to do. And we're not therapists, we're not counselors, we're just going to listen.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Because you know that person so well, for them to ask you that they've already shared a lot of their life with you, and they trust you that what you're going to share with them, their deepest, darkest secrets will be safe. So this is such a powerful time. So the most important thing that the speaker, the listener can do is pray. Pray and get ready to be still and to listen, not think about what you're going to say next back to them when they get done, or if you know of something else that they've done in their past and they left it out of their inventory. And, that's not the time to bring that up. Maybe bring it up later. You'll circle back around a week or so later and say, did you think of anything else that has come to mind since you shared? And just see what they have to say about that, and just give them time, because God is working on their hearts, not me as the listener.
Well, and I love that you said that, just kind of making space for how hard is that? And I mean, again, we just said 40 plus years between the two of you of recovery, and maybe even kind of leaning into that. What was that like for you? I mean, because that is a big deal, right? To be able to come into this space, and what the enemy has convinced us for years to keep hidden, which shame grows in silence. So all this shame has grown inside of me. And I finally came to that realization, okay, it's time. And how scary that is, even though you know it's time, and even though you trust this person, you think, maybe, right, could I? And you're kind of this curious posture, but how hard that was for you the two of you to even consider taking this important step, and what was going through your heart to do that. Scary.
It is. I mean, what was going through our heart to take the step to share our fifth steps? Yeah, I think that what was going through my heart was I'm kind of desperate to feel better. I'm desperate for the healing. How I have done things in the past, that's not working anymore. And I'm in such a place of pain that I'm willing to do the work to make the change. And it's one of those things, Johnny says it a lot, and I'm sure you all have said it as well, that trust the process. And it may not feel good. It may not always make sense. It may not make sense by sitting down with somebody and telling them your deepest, darkest shame and secrets is how that's going to help. That may not make sense. And it's not about needing to rationalize it to make that decision. It's about just trusting and seeing. That's the importance of being in community in this process, right? Especially with people who are in recovery, is that they can tell you it works. I promise you it works, especially with Jesus as our healer. It works. And so that's what it is. It was just the choice to trust, even though I was terrified, because I was desperate for healing.
Yeah.
Me too, Jenny. Yeah. Talking about secrets, no one in our church shared their secrets. We all came to church on Sunday morning like everything was perfect and didn't think anybody else had any secrets. And still we got in Celebrate Recovery and saw that everybody had a hurt, hang up, or habit. But to share those secrets, that was kind of scary at first to want to do that. But it made me, and what Jenny said about trusting the process. Yes, it makes me think of James 5:16 too. Confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. The prayer of a righteous person is powerful and effective. I would have to tell myself that over and over. I am going to find healing if I say this out loud to somebody. I've said it to God, but I need to say it to another person too. And so that gave me hope that when I did this, I was going to be better, feel better inside.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I want to take a quick break right here. We're having a great conversation with Mary Owen and Jeni Baker, just talking about the fifth step and the importance of allowing someone into that space, and the right ways of doing that as the listener or the speaker, and the wrong ways of doing that. So we'll continue the conversation after a quick break. We'll be right back. Hey, Celebrate Recovery leaders, I want to talk to you for just a second. Maybe you've established a foundation through the powerful and effective proven 7 keys of Celebrate Recovery. And now it's time to go deeper as you build on that foundation through advanced training, in-person conferences. We're so excited to meet in person with you. We've got our winter and spring locations on the website. Just go to crconferences.com, and we hope to see you in person very soon for the advanced training. Welcome back. Having a great conversation around the fifth step, and I want to kind of go here, ladies, talking about just what that experience was like when someone did meet you in that space. What were the things that you were seeing in the listener? What was happening that set that experience up for a win personally, as you think back to your fifth step experience? What were some of those fruits of what you saw in your sponsor as you were sharing that?
I think I love active listening. I love when people personally, and everybody maybe has a little bit different preference, but I love it when people are nodding along with me. Nothing is more encouraging than nodding along with me and, smiling, or if I, laughing. Just, it lets me know I don't need verbal interaction back. I just want to know that you're in it with me, that you're tracking with me, and that also it's validating. Even if I say something, if I were to share something hard and they go, or just make a face, that is validating. It's like, oh yeah, ouch, that would hurt, So active listening made a huge difference for me as the person giving my fifth step.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so good. And it makes me think too, as the listener, we need to make sure that we're in a spot where we have the emotional equity, maybe physically we're going to be available and present. If I come in and I'm just exhausted, going on very little sleep, I'm not going to be fully present with you, right, as you're sharing. And that's probably not good for the one that's about to open their heart, right?
That's a good point. That's a good point, Rodney.
Yeah.
That's so true because, a fifth step can take 1 to 2 hours. And so the listeners got to be on their game. I didn't have a sponsor at that first point because when we first started Celebrate Recovery, nobody had sponsors. So we're either having to be each other's, or I had a pastor's wife that listened to my fifth step. And she was so precious. I mean, I just loved her so much. And I just saw Jesus in her eyes. I trusted her. She had such kindness and love, and she was supportive of Celebrate Recovery. So that meant a lot to me. And like Jeni said, her body language, her facial expression, she would lean into me when I talked. And, I just never felt judgment toward me. There was no negative reactions like, like putting her hand over her mouth, like, oh my goodness, I can't believe you just said that. No, she never did any of that.
Yeah. It's like,
instead it was just kindness. Yes. And
yeah,
it was just good. I felt good.
Yeah.
Through the whole time.
It makes me think, and it's important for our listeners to know, in Celebrate Recovery, we ask that you have, a sponsor of the same gender, right? That's important. And that's something I know that some traditional meetings may not require that, but we feel like that's a safe experience, right? We want to keep you in a safe experience. So, but in that scenario, just the visual for me, just thinking about when Jesus is meeting, the woman, the adulterous woman, right? And again, we're gender specific, but just the relationship dynamic, right? She's got all this shame that she's bringing to him, right? And just the posture of loving her in that. And it's interesting, even the people around her are ready to throw stones at her, right? And it makes me think we almost assume, because we've lived with the shame for so long, that you're not going to love me anymore once you hear what I'm about to tell you.
Yeah.
You're probably going to think different of me. We probably won't be as close. And heaven forbid you would throw some emotional stones at me, so to speak. But that posture, when you were talking about that, Mary, just the posture of she was Jesus with skin on. And we can imagine, I can take my heart there. It's like, what would Jesus's face be looking like when she's sharing hard stuff, right? That's so important, isn't it?
Yes.
So good.
Yes.
That's so good. It's funny when you talk about, if I'm struggle with perfectionism here, and we've talked about this, right? If I'm going to be listening to a fifth step, I would want, okay, what is my responsibility then? What is my, and I think to figure that out, it's like, what is the point of a fifth step, right? So there are two, there's the listener and then there's the speaker. And so what's my role as the listener? And my role is to listen. Yeah. And just as you said, be Jesus with skin on, to be present emotionally and physically with them, to listen. And I would say that's it. I know that, and some people might push back on this a little bit with, yeah, but if I'm their sponsor, shouldn't I be taking notes so I can give them feedback? And I would say, please don't be taking notes, because here's somebody that I know that a lot of people, when they talk about when they write their fourth step, they write it, they share it, and then they burn it. Because they're that scared of somebody finding it, or they want to burn it for symbolic reasons. But I know people have their fourth steps under lock and key. They just don't want it getting out, and it's taking everything in them just to share it with you.
Yeah.
And so if you take notes on it, then you are making a copy, in a sense, of their fourth step, because they don't know what you're writing down, and taking it out of their control of who gets to hear their story now. So now you've got a bit of their story that you have promised to keep anonymous, but they don't know what you're going to do with that list. And so I would say, please don't write anything down. And the other thing is, when you're writing, you're not listening, right? If you're writing, you're not listening. And so exactly. I would say, I would just, please just be present and listen. And if you're a sponsor, I feel like that's a whole other discussion. Like, if you're the sponsor, what's your responsibility coming out of it? But I would say, what's your responsibility for listening to a fifth step? It's to listen.
Yeah. And I'm glad you said that. That's good. There is a place, right? I mean, if we're seeing repeated patterns in an inventory, it always ends up, my part is I blow up in rage, right? As we're looking at these things, we're talking about who hurt me, what did they do, what was the damage and the effect. And then this is my part. I turn to this as a coping strategy or a defense or a protection or whatever. And we need to understand the patterns, and maybe it's some shame messages that we're hearing. And so there's some great follow-up in the relationship building with sponsee to circle back to that. It's like, oh yeah, I've seen that pattern. That sounds familiar. Do you remember when that happened with this? And it's good kind of sharpening, isn't it? But it's just so good. I love what you said, Jeni. It's really, this is kind of sacred ground here. And it can feel like, is this really enough? But don't undervalue the weight of just being a good listener, right?
Yes. I want to add to that what Jeni's saying too, is that the speaker needs to see, talking about writing it down and everything. When they see us doing that, excuse me, they think that we're distracted. And so I feel like I need to keep my eyes on the speaker as they're speaking, to let them know that I'm interested in every word that they're sharing, and, not shifting in my seat, make sure my phone's on silent, nothing that could possibly be misinterpreted that, I'm wondering if she'd rather be somewhere else than be here with me. She's just tired or something, and you really got to spend a lot of energy to listen to a fifth step. I mean, even though you're listening, it takes a lot of emotional energy. And another thing to have with you on the table is have a box of Kleenex on the table, because that's nice. I know there was one time when I gave mine and there was no Kleenex around, so I was using my shirt to dry my tears. So, anyway, we got to stay totally focused on their eyes with no judgment whatsoever, no matter what they say.
That's so good. And it makes me think, I mean, have you ever been in a conversation and it just feels like the person has checked out? And we're just talking about simple conversations, right? It's like, I'm telling you the story and it just feels like your eyes just glazed over. Where did you go? And what that does to our nervous system, right? It says, oh my gosh, maybe this is too much for them. Maybe they're judging me. Maybe they don't really love and care for me. And what it does is it begins to shut down thoughts. It shuts down emotion. And then we actually rob the person of the spiritual, godly experience of confessing to another person. So even I love that you said that, Mary. Eye contact. Am I engaged? Like, this is my daughter telling me that she's bleeding, because they're bleeding, right? Emotionally, they're bleeding. And if we just kind of looked at someone bleeding, go, it'll stop bleeding eventually, kind of a thing. It's like, ugh. That just feels cruel, right? And I think that's just important, just to feel the weight of that. Not that it's our job to fix them, but God has called you to this divine appointment for a reason. And you get to be a part of another human being's healing and recovery experience. What a privilege to be able to just listen in that space, isn't it?
It is. And I love what you said earlier. To anybody who's going to listen to a fifth step, don't undervalue the importance of just being a good listener, the power of just being a good listener. I think that it's easy to go, is that enough? Like you've been saying, is that enough? Is that enough? But please don't undervalue the power of just being a good listener. And we've talked a lot about the fifth step, but we've not actually said the fifth step. So I just want to say what the fifth step is.
Please do.
Step reads, as we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs, period. It doesn't say we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to another human being the exact nature of our wrongs so that they can tell us, or so that they can point out to us, or so that they can. It ends with we admitted to God, to ourselves, and to someone that we trust the exact nature of our wrongs. I just want to release anybody from feeling like that is their job. And you just said this, Rodney, that it's their job to fix.
Yep.
I think sometimes there can be an immense responsibility on sponsors that I'm in charge of their recovery, especially if you struggle with any kind of codependency.
Yeah.
Because you love your sponsees, you want to help them. And so it's just release that.
Yeah.
It's not on your shoulders to fix anybody.
Yeah. Well, Mary, you said something earlier, and I want to come back to it because I think it's so important. The perfectionistic, because that's one of my struggles too. I'm in recovery and recovering well, struggling well, but it is still something there. And I think to the people, and I've heard Johnny say this at conferences, a recent conference, you're not going to do it perfect, right? And I think it's so good to just be mindful that I think sometimes God will bring to memory things that he knows we're going to be able to handle right now. And he will reveal new things when we're ready. And so that tolerance for pain, I love that window of tolerance thing. This is what I can tolerate. And I love the loving Father says, I'm going to bring this to memory right now. And as we dig at that, then he exposes new things. And maybe the next go around, he says, oh, remember this. And it doesn't mean my first inventory was a failure, but now I'm ready to handle this. And he did a couple significant things for me in my own recovery with forgiveness and amends to my mom. But that's I love that you said that, Mary, just holding on to that space, just whatever comes to your mind and heart, write it down and then share it. Right.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right, Rodney. I'm telling you, I think there's a verse in the Bible that says something about we're a work in progress until Jesus comes back. So we're not going to check off the list when we do our fifth step. So, okay, I'm done with that now. I'm recovered and I'm going to move on now to something else. No, it's going to be a lifelong process. So that's comforting in a way, because I thought at my first fourth and fifth step that I did, I thought, man, I got to get everything out, right? Everything. I was afraid I was going to leave something out, and I wanted to be honest, with myself. But, it didn't all come out in that first one, because evidently my heart wasn't ready to deal with that yet, my emotions.
Yeah. Yeah. So, this went by so fast, but I want to get some thoughts from you as we wrap up here. If somebody's in the middle of, again, either side of the fence on this, whatever you feel led, they're getting ready to share this stuff that they've written down, or maybe they're getting ready to receive that. What would be a word of encouragement that you would give either side or both, whatever you feel comfortable with, that you would give an encouragement? What would you speak to their heart in this space as they venture into this sacred space we call the fifth step?
Mary, why don't you go first?
Okay. All right. Well, I would say for the person that's going to write in their fourth step and going to share their fifth step, you are going to feel so much freedom now in the days to come once you do this. You're going to keep growing more and more healthy in your recovery because of this huge task. It's a monumental task that you're going to accomplish, but it is going to be so healing to you. And so I just say, don't give up. Believe that James 5:16, that when you confess your sins to one another and pray for each other, you may be healed. That's what's going to happen. You're going to be healed, and it's going to be awesome.
I love that. That's good stuff, Mary. What about you, Jeni?
I would say if you're getting ready to give it for the first time, I feel all that fear. I have been there. I've been there. I second everything Mary just said. It is worth it. It is absolutely worth it. And you're going to feel better on the other side of it. And my other thing I would say is, do your best and let that be good enough. Walk out proud of yourself for what you're able to do. And if you're able to conquer, just a little bit of it, be proud of the little bit that you're able to conquer. I just don't expect perfection out of yourself. Invite God into the process. The Holy Spirit, He will guide you. He will guide you. I promise you, He will guide you, and He will protect you, and He will comfort you, and He will take care of you through the entire process. But be proud of yourself when you're done, because it's a really hard thing.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, and if you're on the receiving end, don't undervalue the weight of what you're doing. And sometimes when somebody's sharing, a lot of emotion can come up on one event or one thing that happened. Don't feel like you have to rush through that. Sit with that for a minute. And if they need to gather themselves, they need a hug, they need to feel your hand on their hand, whatever that is, even just saying, hey, you're doing a great job. Take your time. I'm here with you. I see you. This is hard. And maybe if you've got somebody with as messed up life as I have, one sitting didn't do it. I needed to break it up into two, and that's okay. Don't feel like you have to do a 6-hour, we're going to get through this. And I don't know if I could sit through 6 hours of sharing my, all my junk, but we've referenced that James 5:16 a couple times. And I just want to kind of close with this thought. Therefore confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. Anytime we see that word therefore, it's there for a reason. And it's interesting to back up a few verses. Why is that therefore? In verse 13, it says, is anyone, and I think this speaks to our mission in this fifth step, listening, is anyone among you in trouble? Let them pray. Is anyone happy? Let them sing songs of praise. Is anyone among you sick? Let them call the elders of the church to pray over them and anoint them with oil in the name of the Lord. And the prayer offered in faith, this is the key, the prayer offered in faith will make the sick person well. I love that. The Lord will raise them up. The Lord will raise them up. We don't have to raise them up.
Yes.
If they have sinned, they will be forgiven. Therefore, confess your sins to each other. Pray for each other. Why? So that you may be healed. And that's such a good, that kind of takes the pressure off. It's like, just pray for them. Love them. The Lord is the one that's going to raise them up. The Lord is the one who's going to forgive them. The Lord is the one that's going to make the sick well. And that just takes a lot of pressure off. But what a cool thing that He invites us into that experience, that we get to be a part of witnessing life change literally happening right before our eyes. That's a pretty cool thing to be a part of, isn't it?
Yes,
Absolutely.
it is. Oh, such a blessing.
Yeah. Well, anybody that has a privilege to be on the receiving end of your sponsored leadership, I know that they are blessed. You two are godly women, and I know you bless a lot of people. But thanks for sharing your wisdom and your hearts with us today. I know our listeners got a lot. I've got a lot out of this, and it will help me just to equip me a little bit better as I go to my next fifth step with a sponsee. So love you, ladies, and thanks so much for your wisdom.
Love you too. Thanks for having us.
Yeah.
Love you. Thank you. God bless you.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks for joining us today. I know this road we call recovery can be hard, But if you're in the middle of this process and you got some stuff and the enemy's trying to convince you that you just need to keep that to yourself and it's just made you sick, can I just encourage you, stop listening to those lies. Invite somebody into your pain, your struggles, the lies that you've been believing, so that you can ultimately begin walking in truth and living out new healthy practices that Jesus calls us to. Hey, we're so grateful. If you want to join us on this road we call recovery, go to celebraterecovery.com/groups. Find a group near you. Thanks for listening. Join us next time. Until then, God bless you.